how the lake was managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. There was a desire and a plan to try to minimize harmful discharges over the summer months, which is obviously when we're at most risk to have algal blooms in our estuaries. And if you look, those last 2 years, I mean, we had very, very little in the way of harmful discharges during these summer months. Unfortunately, that's been a little bit different now this year. The lake is now 2.5 feet higher than it was in the previous 2 years. And so if you have normal type of rainy season in the state of Florida, that very well may precipitate the Army Corps doing some of these harmful discharges this summer. We are seeing evidence of blooms in and around the lake, and because of these high levels, we are assuming that the Corps is going to be discharging some of this water with a lot of algae content. Now, DEP and the South Florida Water Management District have been diligently monitoring water quality for evidence of blooms. They have been involved in the Pahokee Marina, which I know is still an ongoing issue. Our message going forward is the 19 and 20 approach to managing the lake was really much more effective than what we've seen. And as we go forward to develop a new manual, when we do the LOSUM, we want that to be done in a way that is going to put a premium on reducing or eliminating harmful discharges during the wet season, during the summer season. So we are urging the Army Corps to allow for the type of flexibility that was really done in 2019 and 2020 in the LOSUM to avoid harmful discharges in our estuaries and to improve lake management during the dry season. During the dry season, maybe St. Lucie doesn't necessarily want it, but Caloosahatchee wanted more water during the winter months. They could have taken a lot more than what they got. Obviously, sending water south, and there's infrastructure needs to go into that, but that's what you really want to be doing. Take advantage of the dry season. Take advantage of sending water when you don't have the algae to places that want the water. Keep the lake level lower so that you have the ability to absorb rainy season without doing these harmful discharges. And so I'm proud to be joined here by Brian Mass. I'm going to have him come up because I know he and I worked on this when we were in the Congress. And fortunately, my first 2 years as governor, the president did tell the Corps, knock out the discharges, do what you need to do that. And I think that was very successful. Of course, we want long-term solutions. We're putting huge amounts of money into our water resources and our water infrastructure. I mean, I did the executive order when I first came into office. During the last 2 years, we've initiated the final phase of the C-43 reservoir, nearing completion of the C-44 reservoir and stormwater treatment area. You see all the progress we're making on the Tamiami Trail. We were with a lot of these folks a few weeks ago. That's going to improve water flow south. And of course, the EAA reservoir is one of the most important Everglades restoration projects that will help us reduce harmful discharges and will also allow us to send more clean water south, and we've been huge supporters of that. We have made expediting that an important part of our administration, and we've tried to expedite the treatment wetland that will clean the water, as well as the reservoir that will store excess water from Lake O. And in my direction, South Florida Water Management District expedited the progress on the treatment wetland component, which the state is constructing, and the district began constructing the stormwater treatment area last year, 12 months ahead of schedule, and so we anticipate that completed hopefully by 2023. And then just last month, South Florida Water Management District executed a project partnership agreement with the Army Corps, bringing us one step closer to beginning construction of the 10,500-acre above-ground water storage reservoir built by the Army Corps. Again, that is a federal project, not something that the state has control over, but we are doing what we can. We do believe that the LOSUM gives us an opportunity to get this on a firmer foundation. There's a lot of stuff. We're happy to invest resources in this, and we're doing billions of dollars over the course of my administration. But managing the lake better, that doesn't cost you anything. I mean, you can do it and really avoid some of the damage that we're trying to avoid. So we're fortunate to have a lot of champions here with us. We are glad that we have money available. I mean, when there are algal blooms, we have the ability to put some technology on the target. You didn't have that 4 or 5 years ago. You now have more tools at our disposal, and we're hoping that the President puts in the full funding request for Everglades Restoration in his next fiscal year budget. We did do very well under President Trump. We have a chance to take it to the next level now under the Biden administration. So I want to let Brian Mast come up and say a few things. We'll hear from a few more people.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate it. Yep. Look, the reason we love our governor is because his most important sense is common sense. We spoke about it a couple of years ago and said if every year the Corps comes to us and says the lake is too high as we have hurricanes on the horizon, then let's use a little common sense and bring that lake a little bit lower. And for the last couple of years, we didn't have these harmful discharges. We didn't have a Lake Okeechobee that prior to even entering summer reached these extremely toxic levels, which is what we have right now with a year that the Corps of Engineers came to us before we even exited the last hurricane season and said, we're not going to manage the next year the same. We're not going to work to lower the levels of Lake Okeechobee like we did in these other successful years. They went into this with the wrong game plan. This summer, this approach to summer, not even into the hottest time of the year yet, shows that it was a totally incorrect way to go out there and manage the lake. And as the governor pointed out, this is the one way to fix these problems that we don't have to spend $1. You don't have to get $1 out of Washington or Tallahassee or anywhere else to fix it in that way. It was successful before. The Corps needs to go back to using common sense, lower the levels of that lake before they get into hurricane season, give it more room, give it a chance for those nutrients, those plants to get the sunlight that they need on the bottom of that lake so that that lake can work the way that it's supposed to, and we will have a better summer for everybody across the state of Florida. Thank you, Governor, for letting me have a minute.
Okay, we've got, who else do we have? Chauncey.
Thanks, Governor. My name's Chauncey Goss. It's an honor to serve as the chairman of the South Florida Water Management District, and I'm delighted to have some of the governing board with me here today, as well as some of our staff. And I want to thank Governor DeSantis for taking the time to visit both the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie rivers today, as well as Lake Okeechobee. I'm from Sanibel over on the other side on the Gulf Coast, and I'm all too familiar with the harm that the Lake Okeechobee discharges can do to our communities, just like you are here. Both the east and the west coasts of our state suffer when toxic algae comes barreling down the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie rivers, particularly in 2016, and then we saw it again in 2018. And then we had Governor Ron DeSantis. He took office and he made a promise to do more for Florida's environment, and he kept that promise. Here we stand 2 years later, and I'm proud of all that we've been able to do and all the progress that's been made across South Florida because of his leadership. There are two major things that need to be done, both to improve the health of the lake and to reduce damaging discharge once and for all. The first is projects have to be built around the lake. Those are storage projects. We're working on them. And the second, the Corps must improve how the lake is managed. Thanks to the governor's leadership in Tallahassee and support from our legislators, many of who are here today, Florida has dedicated more than $2 billion with a B in Everglades projects and water quality since the governor took office. And thanks to the governor's support, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the South Florida Water Management District, we finished our part of the East Reservoir, the C-44. We entered into the final construction contract for the C-43 reservoir on the west coast, and we're ahead of schedule on the southern reservoir, the EAA reservoir, down south of the lake. That being said, to really realize the benefit of all these projects, the Corps needs to improve how it manages Lake Okeechobee. The status quo of lake management that uses the estuaries as a de facto dumping ground for excess lake water, it needs to stop. We can no longer view the estuaries as a zero-risk discharge option. We've seen firsthand the lives and the businesses that have been impacted by those discharges, and we need to have carefully assess and manage the impact discharges have to our environment, to our economy, and to our health. Fortunately, right now, the Army Corps has a great opportunity to move away from the problems in the past, a past in which our estuaries were frequent victims of discharges from Lake Okeechobee, a past in which our economies really suffered, and a past in which the estuaries, the Everglades, and Florida Bay all simultaneously suffered from a lack of water. So we stand with the governor today, and we urge the Corps to prioritize protection of our communities, estuaries, and the Everglades. Today, Lake Okeechobee is too high, as the governor just mentioned. We're bracing for what this summer is going to bring. And at the Water Management District, we're taking every opportunity we have to lower lake levels. We're moving as much water south as we can, and we're expediting the projects that we can. And while we keep our foot on the gas, we're not going to let up on our long-term efforts to build more storage around the lake. We're working on that hard, and we're going to send water south as it's needed. And with this governor in Tallahassee, I know that Everglades Restoration is only going to continue to speed up. I want to thank Governor DeSantis for prioritizing Florida's environment, because the Treasure Coast, because Southwest Florida, and for our communities like Stuart and like Sanibel, where I'm from, our environment really is our economy. So thank you very much, Governor. And now I think Mr. Eichenberg.
Okay. Thank you, Chauncey. Eric Eichenberg with the Everglades Foundation. Good afternoon. This is another great moment for the Everglades, for Everglades Restoration, for the importance of our environment here in Florida. I'm privileged to be here with many champions of the Everglades, but importantly, the governor and Congressman Mast, who are both committing themselves to making a difference as it relates to the various issues that we continue to deal with. The governor made it very clear, this is infrastructure. We are investing billions of dollars in infrastructure under the governor's leadership, and with the legislators that are here today, we're seeing record funding coming out of Tallahassee. Money that in the past was only a dream, but it is now a reality. And when those dollars are being spent to bridge roads, to build reservoirs, to remove barriers of flow that have plagued the Everglades in this state for decades, that's what leadership is about. And this is another critical moment as it pertains to where we sit. There's algae in the water. The governor saw it on the flyover today. But there is a process that's underway that the public is not familiar with, this LOSOM process, the management of Lake Okeechobee. The foundation and others call on the colonel to pick a plan that delivers water to the south during the dry season, during the dry months. Let's send water south. As the governor has said countless times, send water south to the Keys, to Florida Bay. That water recharges the aquifer, nearly 9 million Floridians. The water supply is the Everglades. And then in the wet months, when we have the ability to raise the lake and avoid these harmful discharges to your constituency and to those on the West Coast, that's the balancing act that has to happen. Equitable distribution of water, a balance of water. Under this governor's leadership, we're going to get there.
Okay, Noah.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Noah Valenstein. I have the privilege of serving as Secretary for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and welcome to one of our award-winning state parks. I'll mention, this as a side note, I think the thing I love about the governor most is that everyone here probably has reached out to the governor in one way, shape, or form, talked about local environmental issues, and he's already here getting a briefing, not wanting a briefing in Tallahassee, but actually out in the helicopter, seeing it on the water. I can't tell you what a difference that means for an agency responsible for the environment to have a governor like that who wants to get out, be on the ground, see the impact. It was the governor's second day in office that he set what was an audacious goal at the time, $625 million a year for water quality. You heard the governor just ask the federal government for $725 million for Everglades. Seems like an audacious ask. Until you realize that we've already been successful, thanks to the governor's leadership, every year getting more than $625 million. This year's budget is going to be especially exciting for the agency. We saw more than a $2 billion increase in environmental funding this year alone. With the governor's leadership, Florida recognizes the environment is worth investing in, and we hope the federal government does too, and we look forward to seeing an appropriation like that. As the congressman mentioned, it's not all about money though, right? It's about our scientists on the water. It was about rebuilding our monitoring network. It's about rebuilding enforcement, making sure that we're out doing inspections. Our agency has now had the chance to do more water quality inspections in a single year than we'd ever been able to do before. And again, it's also not about our inspections and about funding. It's about managing the lake. It is wonderful to have a governor that cares about the environment and who can make the call to say, please deviate from how you've done things in the past. Think common sense. We can't have harmful discharges. Certainly, we can avoid having harmful discharges, still protect our environment, still protect our economic growth. We can be different. You've seen that. As everyone has pointed out, 2 years, you saw that demonstrated right in front of our very eyes. And so the most important thing I see and so much appreciate the governor's support is to embed that in how we operate the lake in the future, how the Corps operates and sets a regulation schedule for the lake. That process is ongoing right now. Doesn't always seem like the most entertaining thing to talk about a Lake Okeechobee system operating manual or a lake operating regulation schedule. But what that means is that if we get it right, what the governor has asked for before is built into the books and will happen automatically, and that we'll have a system operating the way it should. So, Governor, thank you so much for your leadership.
Great. And, we think this is an opportunity to really have a framework in place for the Corps that brings more certainty to Florida's coastal communities. Also recognize, when the man did this engineering way back in the 30s or decades ago, they've now created situations where this is not normal the way this water is discharged from Lake Okeechobee. And we will always have to be cognizant of water quality issues in Florida. That is going to be an issue. We obviously are building more infrastructure to address it, investing in technology. When you have this sheer quantity of water that can be dumped into these estuaries, I mean, it's just something that that really overwhelms certainly the state's ability to mitigate. And so that's why we think 2019 and 2020, all in all, were successful seasons. With the way the lake was managed, minimized harm for Florida communities. With the lake at the level it is now, we're really concerned and bracing for the Corps to discharge. And that's not, we think, the way we want to go forward. And so if we can get these LOSUM in a situation where it's having flexibility, recognizing the harm that these discharges cause, what it means for different parts of Florida, I think that we will be in much, much better shape. And really, if they just had regulations that reflected the practice from 19 and 20, I think, Brian, you would accept. I mean, there really was an effort to look at this more holistically. So that would be our goal. That would be our request. And we're totally willing to invest the resource. We've already proven that. I mean, 3 budgets in a row, we've had really outstanding budget passed by the legislature that had a lot of money for water quality and water resources. We're going to keep doing that. So we've got skin in the game, but the federal government's got to do their part, and we've got to have better management. I think if we can get there, I think Florida will be better off. Take a question or two before I leave.
Could you describe the algae today? What did you think?
It was interesting. There were definitely some patches. There were some. I thought I was going to see more in some other areas. Maybe that's a good sign. I think the folks we were with on the helicopter said that it probably is better than it was last week. But, look, at the end of the day, it's only going to get hotter, and we know that is more prime for algae. We did see the wind, I think, blowing when we were on the eastern coast of Lake Okeechobee, eastern side. We did see it blowing in the other direction, which tends to blow the algae out, and it dissipates. When it goes the other way, it really cakes on against the shore. We have now, because we have resources, there are some algicide treatments that are used. Now, if you have the streaky algae, I think that the Water Management District thinks that that's been relatively effective. The problem is if it gets to be very cakey and you put that on, it basically just sits on top of it. It's not really going to do the job, so you've really got to just vacuum it out. So when it's streaky, if you can apply that, they seem to think that it's been successful.
Governor, on the pandemic, is it your opinion that the state has made it through the pandemic to the other side of this as of today?
So here's COVID does not just go away. There's 1918 flu that's still around. I would say if you look at what's happened in Florida, our peak for hospitalized patients was July. And so you have seasonal ups and downs, but it's been much lower, certainly in the spring than it was in the summer. I've said I think it's going to be very low throughout most of the country in May. What then we have to look for is think back to last year. What was the COVID season in the Sun Belt? It was the end of June into July. We had a peak. It was a sharp epidemic spike because we didn't have vaccines. We didn't have very much population immunity. So if we continue doing well, look, we've done well with senior vaccines. I think that as you get younger, there's been a little bit more hesitancy to take the vaccine. And so they're available. We obviously, are advocating folks, particularly, look, if you are elderly, most of the elderly, fortunately, we've got counties that over 90% of the seniors have done. Statewide, we're in the 80%, 80-something% for seniors that have gotten shots. That's very good. If you're not 65 and older, and you have certain health conditions that COVID really can exacerbate, any type of lung problem, obesity, some of these key indicators, even if you're under 65, this really will be worth doing. It will help protect you. And so I think as we get into June, and towards the middle end of June, I think you will likely see the Sun Belt have a more prevalence than we're going to have in May. I think this has been a pretty consistent pattern, but that will definitely be mitigated by the vaccination immunity and the population immunity through infection. And so it's going to be something that is never going to go to zero. Fortunately, we have vaccines that are readily available. We have monoclonal antibody treatments, which have been pretty doggone effective as well. So I think it's just in a much different posture than where we were. When we were a year ago, it was very low in Florida in May, but, we knew it wasn't over. We knew something. Now, if you would ask me, when do you think you'll see it? I thought it was going to come back more in the fall than in the summer. The entire Sun Belt went in the summer. So look as we get into the middle of June, towards the end of June, beginning of July, to see an increased prevalence. But I think that clearly, because of the great vaccine work and the fact that you do have more immunity, I don't think you're going to see the number of hospitalized even come close to what we had last July. I think we had about 9,500 patients being treated for COVID at our peak. I think now we're like 2,700. And if you look at the hospital census, I think we're probably as low as we've been since last November. And I think the part of that's seasonal for sure, but I do think part of that is for the vaccine. So for seniors, I think it's been really, really positive, and I think a lot of seniors feel really good about going out and living their lives. And if you look at the data from CDC on this, I mean, really has been very high performing. Johnson & Johnson, look, I think it's done well. I know you had the hiccup, and I know that some people lost confidence in it, but at the end of the day, I think that was not handled well. You always have something that could happen with these things. That should be put out. Everyone should get that information, and you should make decisions. But certainly, I think on the whole, it's been very effective. And of course, a lot of people are still doing the Pfizer and the Johnson & Johnson. So there's never going to be a time where there will be zero COVID in the world, because you look back, pathogens that were here 100 years ago are still here, but obviously we're in a much better place to be able to deal with it. I think the chance of hospitals being overwhelmed is functionally zero here in Florida and anywhere in the United States, and remember, that was the whole basis for doing the 15 days to slow the spread, was because they said all the hospitals, you'd have thousands of people that wouldn't ever be able to have hospital beds in all these cities in the United States. Fortunately, that never happened. That never came to pass. And if it didn't come to pass when there was no vaccine and no immunity, I think the chance that would come to pass going forward is pretty close to zero. So no, it doesn't go away. People just need to understand that. Yes, you have the ability to protect yourself, and yes, clearly our hospital infrastructure is going to be more than adequate to deal with whatever happens going forward. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Covered the whole history. I didn't know if you were asking another question because I brought your mic down because it was